Chapter 6. Will it work? That summer, a large English fleet was blocking New York Harbor. The fleet included 10 warships, 20 frigates, and hundreds of smaller troop ships and supply ships. The American captain, Samuel Richards, reported that there were more than 300 British ships there. When they spread their sails to dry after a rain, he wrote, they covered a large extent of water. With all those ships blocking the harbor, no trading ships could get in to bring goods to the American colonists. No ships could get out to take products for trade to Europe. Fishing ships couldn't even get out into the ocean. The Americans wanted to drive the English out of the harbor. They thought if the Turtle could blow up one of the British ships, it would scare the English into leaving. David and Ezra moved the Turtle to New York. But almost immediately, Ezra came down with typhoid fever. Now he was no longer strong enough to operate the boat. Quickly, David and the Connecticut officers searched their army for a man who could handle the work. They chose a 27-year-old sergeant, Ezra Lee of Lyme, Connecticut. David Bushnell gave Lee a crash course, teaching him about cranks, the handles, the pumps, the gauges. Lee had to learn in a few days what Ezra Bushnell had been working on all spring and summer. Late in August, the English landed 15,000 soldiers on Long Island. In a battle that lasted only 2.5 hours, the British took the island. When David heard of the defeat, he knew he couldn't wait any longer. A black, moonless night was chosen for the test. It was September 6th. The tide had to be just right, calm and slack. That night, the English fleet was at anchor, just north of Staten Island. The Turtle's target was to be the flagship of the fleet, a 64-gun warship named the Eagle. At exactly 11 o'clock, the Turtle left the dock, towed by 2 American whaleboats. The boats rowed as near to the English fleet as they dared. They untied the little submarine and silently rowed back to shore. Lee felt the tide was still too strong. He cranked the Turtle around on top of the dark waters for almost 2.5 hours. At last, the tide slackened. Now, he could come in close under the 64 guns of the warship. Lee shut the door and pushed the foot valve down. The ship sank deeper and deeper under the water. Lee cranked on the propellers until he was under the Eagle. He took the handle of the mine's wood screw. Quickly, he began turning, but the screw hit hard metal and wouldn't dig into the bottom of the boat. Some said afterward that the Eagle had a coat of copper on its bottom and that the screw wasn't strong enough to bite into the copper. David Bushnell didn't agree. He thought Lee had hit an iron bar on the rudder hinge. David said it would have been easy for the screw to pierce copper because copper is a soft metal. Sergeant Lee knew dawn was coming, but he wanted to make one more try. He moved the Turtle along the bottom of the ship, but somehow the ship got away from him. Maybe the tide was coming in and its force pushed him away. At any rate, he couldn't find the ship's bottom again. By now, it was light. The sergeant knew he had to leave. Then, for some reason, his compass didn't work. The only way Lee could tell where he was going was to come up every few minutes and look around. One of those bobs above water brought him near the British fort on Governor's Island. The guards saw him. Quickly, they sent out a 12-man longboat to check on the funny-looking thing in the water. When the longboat got within about 50 yards of him, Lee let the mine go. He hoped the men on the boat would pick it up and take it back to the fort, but the English were too smart. They were afraid of a trap and rowed back to the island as fast as they could. Sergeant Lee made his way to New York. The mine floated into the East River, where Lee reported it went off with a tremendous explosion, throwing up bodies of water to an immense height. The first test of the Turtle failed to blow up an English ship, but it did prove some important things. It proved the Turtle could safely get under an enemy ship and back out again safely. It proved the clock on the mine worked, giving Lee time to get away. It proved the mine would explode in water, and it proved that Ezra Lee was a very brave man. David always felt that with a little more training, Lee would have been able to find another place on the ship's bottom to plant the mine that night, and if he had, it might have changed the whole course of the war. But this bit of bad luck was just the first in a long line of accidents that would haunt David Bushnell. A few days later, the Turtle was given another chance against an English ship lying off Bloomingdale at what is now about 106th Street in New York City. This time, Lee tried to tie the bomb just under the waterline. A sailor on the ship saw him and called out an alarm. When Lee dived down to hide, the tide swept him away from the enemy ship. Lee wasn't able to find that ship again either. Once more, bad luck had kept the Turtle from success.